Hello and welcome back to another episode of FSC Radio. Today we have with us
Reint van Klinken. I'm the External Affairs Officer of Atmos and studying my second year of the Master Environmental Sciences.
Cool. The voice you just heard on the microphone before Reint was Dhruv, and I'm Ludi, and we will be interviewing you about the Environment and Energy Masters Program and the Atmos Study Association and other related issues.
Right, so just tell us a bit about yourself, like about how you just got into why did you choose to go into this field?
Well, that's already started before my university time. When I was a child, my father and mother raised me to be very nature aware, so I was quite active in that field, so to say. And my peers around me did not quite understand that. Climate change was on the background, but there were more skeptics really in and around my neighborhoods than people that thought it was really a big problem. So then I was very concerned about it, but wasn't heard that much to my own dissatisfaction. So I decided not to pursue it with words, but with actions, and to really get into such a level of detail that I could make structural changes to our society so that it would go a bit more into a general direction. And I was raised very eco-centric awareness, so I try to pick a study that reflected ecology and evolution, and that became my major eventually.
So how did that manifest itself, the being raised as a very environmentally aware child or in such a family?
Well, in high or in basisschool?
Primary school?
Primary school. In primary school, so I was raised very ecologically aware, and it manifested itself by me talking for hours and hours to anyone who would listen to it, that we were burning down our planet and we should all stop driving cars, and very simplistic way of reasoning that a child would. But we need to change this, because I was really, well, almost scared, or not really scared, more like concerned that if we wouldn't do anything about it, it would not hurt me personally, but hurt the environment, biodiversity, stuff like that. And within my mind, that could not happen. That should not happen.
It is interesting that you said that you were raised in such a manner since primary school, because honestly, when I was in primary school, I didn't even know that climate change was a thing, or like, I guess it has like got the attention a lot more in recent years than before that. How important was it in your childhood? Because I learned about climate change, I would say about like 6-7 years ago maybe, and you're older than I am, and you heard of it in primary school. So how does that exactly translate? Because you also say that a lot of your friends did not get it, or like didn't have the same attitude towards the environment.
Well, it wasn't common knowledge, but within my circles of family, it was. So it was really, well, when I grew up, I noticed these type of things, and my family is quite eco-aware, so to say. So they're also concerned for animals and ecosystem well-being, so to say. So it manifested itself during my upbringing, so to say.
So you had to bike everywhere, even when it was raining, because your parents were like, well, if you take the car, that's bad for the environment. At least my parents were that way. Or maybe they just didn't want to drive me, but yeah.
Well, my parents couldn't have driven me because we didn't have a car and still don't. We share a car with my grandparents who live close by as well. So on holidays, we would have a car. But for the rest, I had no other choice than to cycle or take the bus or train, but that costs money. And well, as a child, you get €1 a week or something. So perhaps one bus ride every week, but I wanted other stuff for my money. So I just cycled everywhere.
Was it like annoying for you that like you like everyone else has a car to go to school and you're the only one who doesn't? Did it ever like piss you off that you're the only one who's like, I don't know, doing something for the environment?
Well, the cycling thing I wasn't the only one with that. Almost everyone in the Netherlands has a bike, and if things are close by, I just always biked. But in certain degrees, yes, it was a bit annoying that I seemed for a while to be the only one concerned for the environment, though in certain levels others agreed with me that it was a problem, but just didn't know how to change it. And if they then asked me, then I had no answer for them because I didn't know either. Yeah, or very simplistic answers, just leave your car at home, always. Never go by plane somewhere, stuff like that.
So did that change when you moved? Well, maybe you can talk a bit about your bachelor's first, but then your master. Like, do you feel like you found your tribe with regards to the environment?
It's definitely more with the same attitude now. During my bachelor, in the beginning, biology was very broad. So then 300 or 400 students all followed the same half a year. And that was very much like of bacteria, which you learned about, a little bit of ecology, but mostly medicine or bioprocesses, or a lot of general biological knowledge, so to say. And after half a year, I chose evolution and ecology. And then I learned a bit more about this stuff, but it was still quite theoretical and quite far away from society, so to say. So the modeling was interesting, but still also very, very, in my experience, very much away from society. So when I had the choice to go to do a master, I decided to look really for a master with effect on the society and with prospects that you could go out there and make a change once you finished such a master.
Had this always been your plan?
Up until that point, yes. I've always had the ideal to have a comfortable living, but also having a way to better the world than that I found it, so to say.
Do you remember a moment in your bachelor's degree where you were like, yes, this assignment is, or this course is fun, but I really miss these sort of societal interactions?
Especially during mathematics or statistics, then it was, sometimes it was interesting, but it was so far from what I deemed relevant at that point. And of course, I understood why it was important to learn, and of course, I had to pass it to continue, so to say. But especially some of the courses could have used a bit more interaction with the reality, so to say.
Has your outlook on like what seems relevant to you now changed at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I used to be very much pro-environmentalistic in regards to that we have to change the earth, so to say, or change our way of living so that the rest of the earth and biodiversity has a better place to live. But now I'm also a bit more looking for how can humans change with that in such a way that we all have a place where we can build our dreams and stuff like that. Because growing up in Europe, it's a very nice place to grow up, but you don't get the harsh reality always of the rest of the world, so to say. And I do not want to make Europe a beacon of sustainability on the backs of, well, the rest of the world. So in my master study, I'm also now looking beyond borders, beyond getting a whole supply chain of products from beginning to end. Where can we improve in such a way that everyone should be better off? And especially those first steps, which I learned in my study, are cheapest, but realize most change. So that's quite interesting as well.
So do you think that this global perspective is, would you have gotten that as you grew older, like by yourself, or do you think that your study really helped that?
My study and also my preparation of my master quite helped, because before I went into my master itself, I followed two minors. One was Future Planet Innovation, where we studied sustainability as a broader topic, and that was minor given within the FSC. So giving not just ecology, but also some other aspects of the quite multidisciplinary issues we face with that. And the other minor I followed was energy from the FAB, Faculty of Science of Economics and Business. And that was even more multidisciplinary. And there I met people who had whole other ranges of thinking. For example, in economics might not have the same background or ideology to change the world, but they see it's a profitable business, and they see that global resources are finite. So if you make things circular, then in the long run, you have more profits in that. That was a way of thinking I knew existed, but wasn't really aware of till I actually met those people and started talking on different wavelengths, so to say.
Would you agree with that way of thinking? Do you think that people should, as a whole, think about, or rather, businessmen as a whole should think about how they can increase their profits by saving the environment, or should they just be concerned with saving the environment?
I think if you have the aspiration to change the environment and you have the attitude, I want to leave the world as a better place, then that's a nice way of thinking, and that's the way I'm thinking. But I also recognize that not everyone can or should have that way of thinking because, well, not everyone is the same and not every ideology is the same, so to say.
Right.
So it's a pluralistic view. Like there can be many ways to realize the same. Well, I don't want to sketch a really nice picture here, but like there can be a peace on Earth and a sustainable future, even with people who think like very differently about profits or ecology than you or the people in this in the master program.
Qua ideology, I would say that yes, there are multiple ways to go about it, and if you want to maximize profits, then that's one way of doing it, as long as you take then all streams into account. In economy in high school, I learned that nature was expandable or that it was infinite. Those two assumptions already make that you are, especially if you capitalize the entire world, you're not looking in an infinite globe, so to say. Of course, there are now plans in the making, very real plans to harvest asteroids and stuff like that, broadening it a bit, but eventually resources do run out. So then you cannot continue forever making a profit of the same thing if it's not circular.
Now, oh, sorry.
No, go
Now
ahead.
that you bring it up, now that you bring up asteroid mining, what do you think of it? Because in theory, if you were to mine asteroids, so to speak, you could get any mineral for as like you basically have an infinite source of minerals if you're getting them from asteroids. If you were to ignore the logistics of it, obviously that is a whole problem in itself. But what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's an actually sustainable way of mining?
Well, first off, I am not an expert on this topic because I'm a biologist and only now 1.5 years in following a master degree in physics. But for the brief things that I saw, I think it has a potential to broaden what we have on Earth already, and it would solve some of the mineral scarcity and metal scarcity that is already occurring on the global markets. However, I do think that it won't solve every problem on Earth. I think still emissions, if you have them in the atmosphere, you cannot get rid of them even if you bring in asteroids to power the hardware even more, so to say. So it's a partial fix, and I think it's quite far away still, because it's a whole other frontier. And even though there are massive innovations going on and still exponential curve to what we know, so to say, it's still far from my bed show. So I would not see it as the holy grail to fix every crisis on Earth. I think, especially the energy transition requires a lot of different ways of solving it. And if there was one holy grail, we would have found it already. But there is not yet one in our grasp. So diversifying now is, I think, the best way to go.
Is that a part of your course? Is it?
Asteroid mining, or
I mean, but, like, I mean, you brought it up. So, like, where is that? Is that just knowledge you have from just reading, like, in general, or is that something you actually tackle in your course?
it is a bit of both. In my master degree, you start off quite broad. So you start off with 3 courses that are mandatory to all students, so that you get a general background. And afterwards, you can dive into more specific details. But in those general courses, yes, you get a very multidisciplinary way of looking at things. You start actually, one course is actually called system integration. So there you really take a step back and look at whole systems and see, well, what it's about and where ideal solutions come from. Then there's also another course called Sustainability and Society. And there you get a country assigned, and then you can try to fix within that country the energy problems per week, so to say. And well, it does give you a very broad background if you hadn't one already.
Is it that simple that you get homework to like fix a country's climate problem for a week? Is it that easy to solve?
No, the conclusion all the groups derive at is this is way too simplistic. This will probably not be the whole answer, but some general pointers for a country are often quite often found, because some countries limit themselves not in their technical possibilities, but in their culture sometimes, or in their choices to specify on very much one case, so to say. So some general recommendations can always be had for a country.
What do you think, like, when you speak of such countries, what do you think the biggest problem is? Is it just that they don't have the resources, or does it just boil down to just ignorance?
Well, some countries just started late, so to say. So Europe had its industrial revolution quite early, while other countries, developing countries, are having them now. So China is rising up quite steadily, and India is now getting on a certain track as well, while Africa has still some food issues, so to say. So they do have their own challenges because they lack technology or they lack knowledge in certain areas, and other areas, it's indeed, we know that this is bad. However, we know it's also a quick way to riches. So then they choose to get their profits up now and go sustainable in the future, so to say.
Do you think that the richer countries have like a responsibility towards the developing countries to, well, maybe not to ban, like there was a discussion a while ago about like banning, I think, non-renewable sources like entirely?
Well, if you ban non-renewable sources entirely, for example, the three main ones are oil, gas, natural gas, and coal. And if you ban those all entirely, then everyone in the winter in the northern hemisphere would have a cold winter unless you start chopping down all the woods we have left. So banning everything that is polluting entirely is not yet the way to go, because we don't have alternatives yet to get operational and running, so to say. I do think, for example, some sources are more polluting than others. For example, coal and brown coal are by far more polluting than natural gas. So if you put a bigger price tag on that, then that might help push it towards natural gas and then towards more renewable sources, so to say.
So it's like regulating based on financial incentives instead of just like harshly banning it.
Harshly banning it is quite impossible unless you have a very broad consensus of the entire society. Then that's the way to go.
Yeah.
And often, if you say we're banning this entirely, in the beginning, the broad consensus can be okay, let's do it. But then, if it is also the cheapest way to produce something, then energy prices will level, and then suddenly people cannot pay their gas taxes anymore, or gassing bills, or electricity bills. And then people say, okay, let's get it back, because now we're sitting in the dark, or half of our country is protesting against it. So then you get feedback within itself, so to say. A more gradual way, indeed, of incentivizing with, indeed, some more taxes can then be the way to become more sustainable.
Yeah, so there's no easy solutions in your field.
No, there are not. But some are more easy than others, and some can be more successful than others. So, for example, insulation of houses, That's quite, especially the older houses, is quite easy to do. And then you already can save sometimes up to half the energy price, or sometimes even more than that, just by insulating your house with a little bit of foam in the wall. Those fixes are quite easy if you know where to look. Then you have quite a lot of revenue already going from that. So then it's a win-win situation, both for the environment and for your own wallet, so to say.
Yeah.
Yes. So to go back in the conversation a bit, you said that in the beginning of your track, or your course, and environment and energy, obviously it's a very broad field. You said that you take 3 mandatory courses, and I'm guessing after that you have a lot of versatility with what you choose.
Within the master, it's indeed in the first half of the year, or in your first year you have courses, and in your second year you have 2 projects you do, research projects. And if you indeed zoom into the first year, and then especially the first semester, which are the first block, then indeed there are 3 mandatory courses. One is global change. No, that's not the name. One is I know the abbreviations, but they have quite long names.
It's fine, you don't have to name them.
Okay. Well, in that case, one is about statistics. So you get a general course on how to analyze your data if you have it for your second year. And one is about ecosystems. So I, as a biologist, already knew quite a lot about that. And then one is more physical, but also broader for the energy transition itself. And afterwards, you do have more choice the further on you go. So in block 1B, you have 2 mandatory courses and 1 elective you can choose. Mm-hmm. And the 2 mandatory courses are there more about the society as a whole, but also more about systems within the energy transition and sustainability. And the electives can range from artificial intelligence courses, but also courses from other faculties. So I've been following, in that second block, I've been following course in spatial sciences, because a lot of infrastructure is quite spatial, and especially in the Netherlands, there's a lack of room, so you really need to be smart about what you place where, and sometimes things can be more than just one thing. And afterwards, you have your second half of the first year, so semester 2, and there you have 1 mandatory course you can follow, and for the rest you can just choose whatever you think you want to know or need to know. If you already have a future ahead of you, you want to, for example, go into ESA as a space program within Europe, then you want to pick, for example, more courses about, for example, the atmosphere or weather forecasting or stuff like that. While I, as a biologist, wanted to keep a little bit, I wanted to broaden, but I also wanted to keep that ecological side of me active, so to say. So I wanted to have content based on that. So I chose a few ecological courses there. Yeah, and you can choose whatever you'd like, but it is wise to think about what is wise for your own career path. But if you don't have a career path yet, just choose what you like and see where it leads you.
What do you recommend? Do you just usually have a set goal and just follow it, or do you just see what you like and then just...
Well, we've discussed it a little bit earlier as well. I did have set goals right. Until this master degree, but in this master degree, I saw the versatility of the range of the problems, but also so where solutions were needed. So this year, I'm for the first time a bit hesitant on where to go next. So I have no clue where I'll end up, and therefore in my subjects and in electives I chose, I just picked what I thought was nice and what spoke to me, so to say.
And you are in your second year now?
I'm now in my second year. I'm now in the year that I'm only doing research. So I'm now in the first research about farmers and about nitrogen, and to see in the agricultural sector where nitrogen can be saved, so to say, from the environment.
Oh, that's really relevant right now as well.
It is. I wanted to be close to the actuality. And I think you've noticed, but before COVID, there was another crisis, namely the nitrogen crisis, and it's still there. So it's bad, but all the problems in the world give me a chance to fix them, and therefore giving me in the future a job. So it has a silver lining to me personally as well.
I think that's it for this episode. Thank you, Reint. I hope I said that right.
You did. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time and
For your optimism. Bye bye.